Board of Education special meeting on Wednesday, May 20th, 2026. We're going to call this meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Burrow, you do roll call, please.
Ms. Rotarius?
Here.
Mr. Burrow here. Ms. Ankley?
Here.
Mr. Wade? Here. Mr. Burns?
Here.
Mr. Eckert?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
We have all 7 members present.
Thank you, Mr. Burrow. Adoption of the agenda. Any additions? Deletions? Amendments? None noted. This will bring us to questions and comments from the audience. Would anybody in the audience like to be recognized at this time? Okay, hearing none. New business, we communications, our superintendent interview. I apologize if you were here last night, you didn't hear my speech for a second night in a row. Welcome community members, thank you for taking the time to join us for the first round interviews of Almont Superintendent Search. Please note that members of the audience who wish to provide feedback may complete an interview feedback form following the interview. The forms are on the table and after completion will be copied and distributed to all the board members. On behalf of the Board of Education, I want to begin by expressing our appreciation for the time, preparation, and commitment each candidate has invested in this process. Selecting our next superintendent is a significant responsibility, and we approach it with seriousness, transparency, and optimism for the future of our district. We're deeply grateful for the insight and engagement our staff and community have contributed towards this process. As we begin tonight's interviews, we look forward to understanding how each candidate's leadership approach and vision can help guide and strengthen our district in the years ahead. Please be respectful and mindful throughout the night of cell phones and other distractions. Thank you for participating in this process, and we will now welcome our candidate, Kyle Wood.
Board, I'd like to introduce you to Kyle Wood, who's Assistant Superintendent in Croslex. Welcome.
Welcome.
Hi, Kyle.
Sherry Ankley.
Nice to meet you. Russell Rowe.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Adam Eckert. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Janine Smith.
Nice to meet you. Chelsea. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Katie Rotarius. Nice to meet you.
Okay, first, welcome and thank you for being with us. All the board members will be asking questions tonight in a round robin format. Are you ready to begin?
I am.
Okay, great. So your first question is, what aspects of Almont Community Schools most attracted you to this position, and how does your experience align with those needs?
All right. Well, thank you, President Smith, for the welcome me, and I'd like to thank the board for this opportunity to interview with all of you. Community, this is a tremendous showing, so I appreciate everyone taking the time to come out and see who your potential next superintendent could be. It just shows kind of what I've heard about the Almont community and the value of education. And so I'd like to give just a little bit of background about myself and then get into why Almont and why superintendent now. So I think as I work through some of my background, one of the things that it's important about why education for me. And so I'm from a blue-collar, working-class family that valued education. And throughout my journey, I've had numerous coaches, teachers that provided that inspiration. And I've also had many opportunities in education that were provided and barriers removed that if they weren't removed, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today. And so as I get into my background a little bit, started off Croslex, graduated from Croslex, and that's when one of my first opportunities came up at SC4. There was tobacco money based on my MEP scores from, this is dating me a little bit here, But that allowed me to go to SC4 for my first year. And had I not had that tobacco money, I don't know if I would have been able to go to college. After that, I learned about, you could take loans and do all these other things. So I went to Central, got my bachelor's, and then majoring in history and social studies. From there, I taught 4 years in Croslex, where I coached against the Raiders here. And, so that comes some of my first interactions with Almont. And then from there, I went across the county as junior, senior principal of Marlette. That was a 7-12 position, about 500 students. A couple of unique opportunities while I was there. I was a part of the Gerstacker Fellowship Program. That's a year-long leadership program through SDSU. And I was able to, and the culminating part of that program is a 2-week trip abroad. So we went and visited elementary, middle, and high schools in Hong Kong, Chongqing, and Taiwan. And so we got just some opportunities. From there, I transitioned back to Croslex as a high school principal, 912 building, about 650 students. While I was there, actually backtracking to Marlette, I was able to finish my specialist degree. Moving forward back to Croslex, many opportunities there working with staff and students. I was in that position for 6 years, also in Marlette for 6 years, and then currently I'm the assistant superintendent for the last 4. So just wanted to share a little bit of background so the board has a little bit more in the community, a little bit more about me. As far as why superintendency now, I think it's important that those opportunities and those experiences that I've had, those inspirations, that's at the core value of what I believe education should provide for students. And reducing barriers for students to be able to do things. I think back when I was in Marlette, for example, and we talked about concurrent enrollment. We didn't have a college or university in the county, and so we wanted students to have that access. And so we had staff members on staff that had masters in the subject area. So we were able to provide concurrent enrollment classes through Ferris State University in our local campus. And so that's just an opportunity that sticks out that I feel like was very beneficial for our students. So as far as why Almont, the first thing that as I learned more about Almont, I really feel like you're living your vision. And so, your vision, students will be exceptional, lifelong learners, positively contribute to their community, empowered the best version of themselves. As I researched, the academics are incredible, right? The elementary achievement is incredibly high, 1, 2, or 3 across the county. The number of AP classes at the high school, the number of clubs, saw the post today about the varsity singers, sounds amazing, right? We've got art club, you've got band, you've got drama, NHS. I've been a part of Almont with the BWAC luncheon. And so I just feel like you're living your vision as far as putting students first and allowing them to become the best version of themselves, no matter what that is. And so the other thing I believe is a great fit is because I'm familiar with this size school district. Majority of my career has been in Croslex, a fellow BWAC competitor. This size school, I feel like is the ideal size. We're big enough to where we can provide opportunities to students, but yet we're small enough to where I know every staff member, we know the custodians, we know the community. And when we implement something, we monitor student achievement, we have the ability to see the difference or the impact right away. Another thing that I really like is the strategic plan. As a superintendent coming into a community where I wouldn't know many people, your strategic plan aligns with my core values and also some of the things that we've been doing in Croslex. So for example, a couple of them, the operational facilities, we were just able to pass a $37.1 million bond earlier this month. And then we've got the personnel and culture, attracting and retaining highly qualified staff. That has been one of our strategic plan goals as well that I feel like I can come in and contribute to. I want to back up a step and say, my goal would be to come in and add to assimilate into the culture, not disrupt. Okay, so I want to make sure I make that point. And I think it was you, President Smith, I was watching the selection committee meeting, and I think you said, we want someone that will grow with us. And I thought, that is the perfect, spot as far as what we want or what I would be looking for coming in as a superintendent. Let's grow together and take Almont, to higher heights. And I also talked to a variety of people, and one of the people I worked with in Marlette, this was 10 years ago, we still remain in communication. He worked here a little bit ago, and I talked to him and he said, this would be a great fit for you. And he says, this is a great community, values education, with your personality to build relationships and what Almont needs. He said, you would be a perfect fit. And so I just thought, man, the more this adds up, this is a great situation. And lastly, I'm looking for my last district. I've been in education for 20 years. I've been in 2 districts those entire 20 years, and I'm looking for that last fit, that last long-term. I can retire in 5, I plan on staying 10, and I want to be in 1 district the rest of that time. I think those are all the reasons why I think this would be a great partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question will be asked by Vice President Eckert, and then we'll proceed in order.
Okay, thank you.
What is your philosophy on improving student achievement?
All right. Well, I think improving student achievement comes down to a number of things. I tend to relate improving student achievement to a backwards by design approach, like a teacher would take with a unit, knowing what the end goal is, and then building the curriculum to that. If student assessment is our end goal, then what are our processes and systems in place to get us to that point of student improvement? So if that's our end goal, then we have to have a data analysis system or a way to evaluate how well we're doing. Well, if we're gonna get to that point, then we have to have an assessment schedule in place. You know, we need to have our benchmarks, we need to have our interim assessments, our common assessments. And then backtracking from that, we need to know what we want to teach. So what does our curriculum mapping say? What do we value most as a building or as a school? And so as you backtrack that, then how are we purchasing and creating curriculum that aligns all of those? Okay? And then when we get to the part of an assessment or the data analysis piece, if students aren't achieving where we want them to be, then we shift over to what is our process to support them? What is our MTSS process? And so then we backtrack that process. If a student isn't reaching their benchmark, what interventions are we providing based on their needs? And then as we backtrack that, how are we progress monitoring? How often are we doing that? Are we bi-weekly progress monitoring to ensure that intervention is providing the most benefit to that student? And as you get into this assessment cycle, it repeats and we adjust our instruction. So if we give an interim assessment at 6 weeks, when we give that interim, the next one at 12 weeks, we've adjusted our instruction based on that last result to rework in the skills and standards that we're struggling with. And as we repeat that process, that's how we get that student achievement. And it just becomes something, it becomes part of our culture, that data analysis process. It's not a one-off, this is just what we do. Thank you. Sorry, got a little animated there, sorry.
Next question. How do you build trust with staff, families, unions, and the community, especially when there are competing interests?
Yeah, great question. I think the foundation of all of our relationships is based on trust. And so coming in from the outside, right, and then not knowing really anyone in Almont, I think that trust comes down to transparent communication, coming in, listening, learning, observing, making sure to start those relationships off on the right foot. And I think as you work with me, you'll see that the decisions I try to make are always rational. That, you know, the board makes hard decisions, right? We don't get any softballs in these positions. And so one thing as I work with the board, the community, the staff, you'll see that I make rational decisions based on a thorough investigation, gathering information from all sides, and then making that decision. But I want to backtrack a little bit there as far as, you know, I think the first most important relationship is starting to develop trust with the board. So that would be based on transparent, proactive communication. I want to make sure, and I would plan to meet with each board member one-on-one. I want to make sure that we have our communication system and process in place. You can expect me to provide a weekly board note that would be delivered or emailed Friday or Saturday morning, depending on how the week went. And then you can also count on in the week type communication. If it's an event that you need to know about this now, I might send it to you in email, send you a text, hey, check your email. I never want a board member to hear about something and say, I don't know, or I haven't heard that yet. If I know about it, the board needs to know about it. We wanna over communicate, especially early on, until that we develop that trust of, oh, he may know about it and he's working on it. And I think the same thing, it's the same approach with staff, right? Supporting staff. When coming in, I wanna support the staff. I wanna support the building administrators to build that team in that collective capacity and show that we're in this together. And so I think you continue to build that support with staff. I still observe classrooms. I still provide feedback. I'm not the evaluator, but letting the staff and working with the staff to let them know we're in this together. Making a transition curriculum-wise. I know the elementary switching from K3 from Wonders to Amplify. What is our professional development schedule with that? Where are we at with that? Those are all things I'd wanna know right away so I can be involved in that process and start to build that bridge. As far as families, you know, I feel like that is visible and approachable, making sure that I'm available. I will be at extracurricular events. I will be at the drama club performances. I saw the Heritage Days in September I want to be at. So making sure that I'm inviting the community in with coffee with the superintendent, but I'm also putting myself out into the community so we can have open two-way communications. If there's a student safety issue, you can expect transparent communication from me to the community. We had an issue a week and a half ago of a suspected gas leak. We communicated multiple times with the community throughout the day as we evacuated the building, had an all clear to return. And that's what you can expect in that from my perspective. And that also, I think, helps add and gain that trust. And then the union, I mean, these are tough times. There's no way around that. I mean, budgets are getting tighter in their school districts. And so to have that open collaboration with the union, I'm not one to play like, you know, the high-low game. I'm more one to say like, here's what we got. Like, here's where we're at. Here's what finances we have. How can we work this out so it meets what you need, but it also keeps the district financially or fiscally responsible. So we've just started those negotiations again with our CLA. We had a great meeting this morning. Very open, collaborative. We worked on language together because we have that relationship with them. And so I think it's just that honesty, that trust and transparency. Thank you.
What partnerships have been developed between your current district and its business, community leaders, and human service agencies?
Well, I think what's popping into my head first with the community and our local businesses, we recently hired, it's been a couple years now, a career and college advisor. And so one of the things we were realizing is that there were so many opportunities our students were missing just because we didn't have the manpower to talk with them, to plan all that out. And so since we've hired that person, our relationships with the community have grown exponentially. So we host a career fair where we bring in 75 local businesses, and the community comes in and we bring all of our students around. We bring our middle schoolers around. They meet with businesses. We have students walk away with interviews from the career fair. We bring other schools from the county in. And then another thing that we do is we have senior mock interviews that are required for graduation. Same thing, we bring the community in the fields that the students are interested in learning about, and we have them interview with those potential businesses or health professionals, vets, those type of things. In general, I think our partnership with the community was in full effect. We had a lot of communication, numerous community meetings with our bond campaign. We worked extensively with our community, open houses. We went to city meetings, and we were able to answer a lot of questions that the community had. And I feel like that's what helped us pass our most recent bond. It's just that community collaboration and the staff supporting that. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
How do you maintain visibility in the district?
Yeah, I mean, visibility is huge. I'm fortunate that I was the high school principal previously, and now I've moved into the assistant superintendent role in the district. My visibility is a little different now as a building principal, right? I was at, every athletic event, baccalaureate, all graduation. Now my visibility is still within the community, but it's at PLC meetings. It's at curriculum meetings after school. We just had our instructional planning committee meeting last night. And that's where we meet with our grade level and departmental meetings. And so we literally planned our AI training for next year with staff input. And so visibility with the staff is a lot of those type of meetings, but I'm also still active in the community. Obviously, I'm still attending events, Friday night football games. We just had a wonderful graduation ceremony on Sunday. And I'm also in the community. I'm on 2 boards on the community. I'm part of the Neighborhood Improvement Authority for the City of Croswell and the Ordinance Committee. I'm also at community events with my boys, you know, the Pioneer Days, the festivals, the fireworks. And so people see me in a variety of capacities with the school and not with the school. Yep.
How do you keep your staff informed about information that affects their jobs?
Well, I think that goes back to the trust piece. And I think that, you know, keeping them informed, you know, for a building administrator, for example, and the directors, we're gonna meet, I probably wanna meet bi-weekly starting out. And I'll have an agenda for everything. They'll be able to participate. We'll have the group collectively there together. You know, we'll share, each director will give an input on, or an update on where everything's at within their department. The building administrators will do the same. And so I think bringing the group together and staying informed of any legal matters. Right now, our admin team and us have been working hard on PA 146, the dyslexia law. So we've got everything at least started to be in place for that 27-28 school year. So we want to make sure we're relaying that important information. But I feel like I like bringing teams together. I was just at the middle school staff meeting this morning. I provided an update at the end of the year on our curriculum plan, where it's wrapping up this year and what our plan is for next year. And I do that with each of the building staff meetings in May. And so I like to get in front of the staff, and I like to relay that information in a variety of forms. I provide updates, usually quarterly, on staffing, because part of my role is also in HR. So I provide staffing updates, new staff, any legal updates, curriculum updates. So I feel like that is how I approach the piece about keeping everyone informed. I like to get out and talk with people. If I have to, I send out mass emails, but just making sure everyone has that information. I meet with the building leadership teams. I can give you an example of a curriculum process. We've we've adopted multiple curriculums over the past few years. That always starts with a collaborative review of the process. So every teacher involved has all the information about the curriculums we're potentially going to pilot. So they select what ones we want to pilot. I get the information, set up the training. They begin to implement. We train throughout. They have input. We have grade level meetings and PLCs that I attend, and then we have whole group meetings where we bring the entire elementary staff together. So they're informed and collaborative. It's a collaborative process throughout until we get to the board approving the curriculum, as just an example. So, thank you.
Hello. Hi. Rate yourself from strongest to weakest in the following 4 categories: finance, curriculum, staff administration management, community, and share why you rate yourself for each.
Oh, that's tough. That's tough. I would have to say the strongest areas would probably be curriculum and staff administration, just because we've done so much curriculum work over the past 4 years. So when Ms. Moody and I came into our positions, we had our math and ELA curriculum expiring in a year. We didn't have a social studies curriculum, and our science curriculum needed some TLC. So that's been a big focus, is that process that I just kind of highlighted. So I would say that's definitely a strength. Staff, admin, you know, coming from the building, and I came from the high school, Ms. Moody came from the elementary. We're very familiar with running the building, have great relationships with the staff. So, I mean, when we have a question, we just go and talk to that person, right? Like, we're small enough to where we can do that. And I'm gonna cheat a little bit. Finance and community, I'm gonna tie those two at the end, just because finance, I'm involved, so a little bit about my finance background. Building level, had a couple $100,000 budget when I was at those. I'm right now in charge of state and federal grants, which we have a $2.4 million budget for that. And that is, we have title, we have 31A, 31AA. We use 67F to help pay for our career and college advisor. 35M to help pay for some of our curriculums. We use 12E grant to offset our sinking fund boiler costs the year before, so we saved $300,000 and can roll that into this year. And then as far as budget planning, I'm heavily involved in that. We're expecting a 2.5% foundation increase for next year. We don't know the categoricals yet. We've made staffing adjustments and absorbed some positions through attrition, knowing our enrollment is going down. So I helped build our $23 million budget as well. And then in the community, I walk down the road and I'm waving to people constantly. Like, I know people in our community and involved, not just in the community, but from the school. When I attend those City of Croswell meetings, there's always multiple school questions that come up. And so I'm gonna say 3 for finance and 3 for community on that. Thank you. You're welcome.
What systems will you put in place to ensure transparency and accountability to our board, staff, families, and community?
Transparency and accountability. Board, staff, and community.
Board, staff, families, and community.
I think, as you can probably tell by my previous answers, right, I'm kind of a process and systems kind of guy. So I think the transparency and trust, that kind of goes back to that, and then the accountability piece. I think as far as the relationship with the board, I think that as long as we are, we know our roles and we stay within our roles, I think we'll be just fine. To me, the board sets policy, enters into collective bargaining agreements, and approves the strategic plan, right? And so the admin's job and the superintendent's job is to execute those. We want to make sure we're abiding by the contracts. We want to give updates on how we're doing with the strategic plan. And the last one I said there was strategic plan, contracts. Oh, and obviously implementing the policies that the board approves, right? So I feel like as long as we're doing those things, the transparency and communication, I'm gonna stay in my lane and handle the day-to-day operations. And I think as long as the board is, stays in their lane, I think we'll be all right. And I think as long as we have those clear expectations, and that's part of the one-on-one meetings to start the year, maybe we need to do a board retreat as well, just so we can get to know each other even better. But I feel like that will naturally happen. I'm gonna over-communicate. I'm gonna put a ton of detail in those board notes. So hopefully you're like, stop, enough. Like, we don't need this much information. And then I can scale it back and we'll find that happy medium. As far as with the staff, I think having just open, honest conversations about where we're headed, right? If we're working on a curriculum or we need to do something, or if student achievement isn't where we like, or if student behavior is becoming a problem, okay, let's talk about that, right? We were seeing the same things, and I'm guessing the staff here is seeing more extreme student behaviors. So let's develop a plan. We brought in a behavior interventionist. We trained our staff in trauma-informed training. We looked at our PBIS processes. And so I think as long as you're providing that professional development and training, then we can hold staff accountable and say, well, how are we supporting this with our PBIS model? Oh, this student isn't a tier 1 student. This student needs some tier 2 behavior interventions. Okay, let's support that. But if we give that documentation and we say, hey, we gotta document this so we know, then we have to do that, right? So we can hold the staff accountable, but we have to provide the support and be open and transparent with that first. As far as families and communities, one of the things I noticed, your website, your Facebook page does a great job communicating. I saw Ms. Van Hiltmeyer's, the operational millage coming up. Great stuff, right? Relaying that to the community. I am gonna have to talk to Mr. Zimmerman though. He made a post in November at a halftime score of 37-0. Almont was beating Croslex. And so I am gonna have to talk to him about that, so thanks for the throttling there, guys. But in general, right, the communication is there. And I know part of your strategic plan is to look at how do we market Almont better. And so I think that is just something we need to be cognizant of as we talk about continuous improvement and following the strategic plan. And I think that's how we become more transparent with our community. Holding them accountable, as long as they're following the school rules. I mean, if those situations pop up where they don't, we address that, right? But I think it's also two-way communication that we need to be reaching out to them and inviting them in, right? Having two-way conversations with them, getting feedback from them. That was one of the things in our bond process. We had so much feedback, and when we got a question, we would post that question to our frequently asked page, and we would repost that so the community could see we were listening. So I feel like it's that two-way transparency.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Describe your leadership style and give an example of a situation where you successfully led a group.
Leadership style, honestly, I would say my leadership style is adaptive based on the situation. And I'll give a couple examples. Normally, I tend to prefer a distributive style leadership, which is basically a collaborative approach, but it emphasizes as many voices being heard or involved as possible. And I'll give you an example. We did our writing curriculum, and we narrowed it down to 3 curriculums we wanted to pilot. Well, each of our elementary grades had 3 teachers. So each teacher got a different one of those curriculums. And then they met, they discussed the pros and the cons of each curriculum at their PLC meetings. We would bring the group back together, same thing, how does this vertically align, how does it horizontally align, and we'd have those collaborative conversations. And what I learned early on in my career and why I like that process is, and this isn't a knock on those staff that are involved in everything, right? But this was actually in Marlette, and I asked the staff members, hey, would you join this? And she had some great input, and I said, hey, thanks, that was awesome. And, how come you're not involved in more of this? I've never been asked, right? And so just like a student, what do we tell our students? Get involved, extracurriculars, right? We preach that to them because we know they're likely to do better and contribute to the climate and culture. Well, I found the same thing with staff. Let's involve more voices, as many as possible, to make sure that everyone feels valued and invested and they have a voice in their performance, in their job, right? Now I'll give you a different example, situational. So going back to that suspected gas leak, right? We needed to evacuate one of our buildings rather quickly, right? So that when it matters of student safety, you have to become a little more directional. It was still a collaborative team approach, and the team was amazing that day. But we still had to call our transportation director and say, hey, how many drivers can you get here in 10 minutes? We had to call the elementary principal and say, this is what's going on, the gas company's on the way, police are on the way. You need to start letting your staff know, but we can't let them know in an email. Like, you need to have a plan to get the staff notified that this is what we're doing. Then we had to call our other building principal and say, hey, we're bringing an elementary building to your building. Based on your empty classes, where can they go? And so those are just a couple examples of different styles of leadership depending on the situation. Another one I'm thinking of is where you have to be a protector sometime. I had a drama teacher who was getting beat up by parents a week before the performance. A parent wanted to meet with her and I said no, because I knew she was gonna quit if they did. And so the next day she said, thanks for not letting that person meet with me. And I said, you're welcome, I knew you'd quit. She said, I would've. And now I've got an issue, because I didn't protect my drama director, we don't have a play in a week, and we said we would, right? So it just depends on the situation. And as far as leading a group, I think we could talk about a variety of things there. What's kind of popping in my head is the strategic planning that we did a couple years ago. Leading that, assembling that group of parents, community members, board members, administration. We did have a facilitator, but we still kind of led that process as far as if something had to be done, we would reconvene in an all admin meeting and we would hash out some of those details, and we take it back to the committee, we get input from the other groups, we meet with those groups. So I think that is probably one of the, as far as like leading a group in that process. Thank you. You're welcome.
If you had to name one non-negotiable value that will guide your leadership here, what would it be and how will we see it in action?
I think my one non-negotiable is we will do what's best for students. In the decisions that we make, we'll do what's best for students. and that I feel like is at the heart of the decisions I've made as a teacher, administrator, and now central office. And I feel like we have a duty to provide that opportunities and those barriers of removal, because they benefited me in my career so much. A perfect example, we had our CL5 program was our early college program. And we were losing students because they had to have a vehicle to drive down to SC4, which was 25 minutes away, and some of our lower socioeconomic families didn't have a vehicle. So we worked with SC4 to bring more classes to the campus, right? We need to make sure we're continually looking at opportunities for our students, and how do we remove those barriers? There may be barriers in there that students want to participate that we can't, that we don't even know about. Right? When I was building principal and the AP test was coming, yes, free reduced students get a reduced fee, but some of our families couldn't afford that reduced fee. So we paid for all of it. If you wanted to take the AP test and you were free or reduced lunch, I pulled from my internal account to make sure we covered that. Because I didn't want a student to lose out on 3 or 6 college credits because they financially couldn't afford that reduced fee. So that's what drives me in my decision making and what's best for students. Now, obviously, we got to include the staff in that, right? We got to have the right people in the right places driving the bus. So we have to have the right staff in there too. But we're here for the students, and so that's what you can count on if I'm your next superintendent. You're welcome.
How will you ensure that decisions you make reflect unique needs, values, and priorities of this district rather than the generic best practices?
Like that you put the generic part at the end, that's good. I think that will be the challenge, and I've got a 90-day plan that I want to give to the board at the end of the meeting. But I feel like that's where my learning, most of my learning will come, especially in the first 90 days. You know, I need to know that institutional knowledge, right? That's part of the reason why I want to meet with each board member, is I want to start to gain that institutional knowledge and meet with the staff and the directors, right? If facilities is one of our goals, I want to walk around with the facilities director and I want to see, right? We have events that are from 1950s, early 1960s in Croslex, right? Those are things I need to know about so then we can create a plan to attack these strategic plan goals. And so that institutional knowledge with the different groups is going to be paramount. And that's that listening, learning, observing. I want to come in and assimilate and absorb as much information as I can. I'm not coming in to make decisions. This is an excellent community, strong academically. I'm coming in to gain knowledge and add where I can and determine, with the board, with the staff, with the community, and most importantly, with our students. One of the things I haven't mentioned is I plan on bringing in or having a student advisory council. If we're talking about opportunities for students, they need to have some input. So I would have a student advisory council that I meet with multiple times throughout the year, so we can have their values and their inputs on their educational experiences. And so I think that'll be my approach to determine what those values and priorities are.
Next, how would you ensure that our district's financial decisions stay aligned with our students' needs and community priorities, especially when facing budget pressures or competing demands?
Financial decisions based on community priorities. I think right here with the strategic plan would kind of be the start of that, right? Like, we want to make sure that, we have the facilities plan, that we're making progress in those areas. And great sign, by the way, as you pulled in talking about the sinking fund dollars and what they've been spent on. I saw that on your website as well. So great communication and transparency. But I think this will drive kind of what these decisions are. And we have to monitor, the enrollment has fluctuated a little bit, but I also saw or read that your smallest group is your kindergarten group, right? So if we have seniors graduating and a lower kindergarten group coming in, we've got to be making some adjustments along the way before we get into a situation where we're having a deficit budget. And so, contracts, looking at those types of decisions. I had a superintendent tell me, your budget is your priorities in dollars and cents, right? Well, we've got 76% of our budget tied up in people. So when a staff member leaves or retires, we need to take a look. Can we absorb this position or no? Right? We need to remain and ask and have all those decisions before we get in a spot where we're in trouble. And I think going back to the community priorities, it's personnel, culture, communication, leadership. And so I think a lot of these on here, now the operations ones, obviously that's an expensive one, right? It's so expensive to do any of that work. But a lot of these, attracting and retaining qualified staff, we wanna make sure we're good or sound financially so we can have competitive salary schedules, that we're remaining consistent with our competitors. But some of this stuff on here, having better marketing for our school, those are things, instead of hiring a marketing manager, for example, we partnered with a company and they do some of our social media posts for us. And so those, I think we need to be fiscally responsible with our decisions, but some of these don't cost a ton of money. It's about valuing our people and putting programs and supports in place to do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
What characteristics do you look for when hiring staff?
That's a good question. I think, first and foremost, I look at, obviously, aside from the certification requirements and that kind of thing, I look at how they would fit in, and this is something I'd have to come in and learn, but, if we're hiring a high school English position, for example, how would they fit in with the high school team? How would they fit in, with the high school, English staff, English teachers in that department? I feel like the fit is one of those things. You always want a balance of people, right? Some are outgoing, some are a little more dominant, some are a little bit more go with the flow. And you always want to have a balance of people within each department, each group, within each building. And I also want to make sure, obviously, that they're intelligent, articulate, and most importantly, they have a love for students. If I can't tell that you have a love for students in your interview, and that when you talk about students, you don't get a little excited, or you can't sell yourself for 30 seconds about how important it is to provide opportunities for students, those are the things that I look for too. I want the passion, obviously the certifications, and then I look at the fit as well. I was gonna say, I'm speeding up a little bit because I don't know exactly how many questions I got. I see 6 minutes.
So I can let you know there are 3 more.
Oh, okay. And I gotta get closing here, okay.
The closing, you have 5 minutes after that, so.
Nothing but time. All right, 2 minutes each, here we go.
Some people consider themselves to be big picture people and others are detail oriented. Which are you? And give an example of a time displayed.
Clock's ticking, and I feel like I'm a little of both. I think you have to be, I like to, like my role right now, I am always comparing myself, like I've got a foot in the now and a foot in the future. Because, okay, this end of the year is wrapping up, but we need to have next year planning out. So big picture is definitely, I always call it the umbrella. I've got a variety of pieces of pie in my to-do, but they're a small piece of my pie. And the person who's doing the job, obviously it's a much bigger piece of your pie. And that strategic planning and thinking and student opportunities and how we can partner with a university. We created a CTE program at the high school, so we're working on an articulation agreement. So that's where the details piece come in. I think you have to have both, right? You have to have that overarching vision, but you have to be detail oriented enough to, the devil's in the details, and you have to be detail oriented enough to put the processes in place and make sure everything goes smoothly with those processes. As far as the detail oriented, I would say, like, for example, our grants, there's timelines, there's specific requirements, like 31A has to have so many different, you have to have the people, the amounts, you have to have whether the free or reduced students are receiving those services. And so, like, you have to be very detailed in that end of the year report that's due July 15th. And so I think you have to have a little bit of both, to be honest.
Thank you.
What do you do to draw in non-school community members?
Non-school community members, that's a good question. I think you invite them in and you try to make them part of the community. You try to show all the things you're doing for students and create that excitement. And maybe it's an old person who loves music, and so you post that, hey, we've got our varsity singing performance coming up, or we've got our band festival coming up. And so I think you just try to invite people by relaying that information and marketing, which is one of our goals, to invite those non-school people in. And I also think they have to have a voice, right? Especially when you talk about bonds and those kind of things. I mean, it's different if you've got a kindergartner and you know that your kindergartner is gonna benefit from a bond for the next 12 years of their life, right? But if they're not a community member, how do we get them to buy into a bond, or how do we get them to support it when they are saying, well, my taxes might go down if I don't pay this, right? So how do we reach out to them, how do we hear them, and how do we have them still support the school community, I think is very important in that process.
What is the riskiest decision you have made? What was the situation and what happened?
The one that's coming up is concurrent enrollment. So I was 27 when I started in Marlette as the principal. We heard about concurrent enrollment, and the AP teacher at the time was a legendary staff member, but she did not have the master's in math that was required to teach the Calc 220 through Ferris State University. And we had 10 to 12, 15 kids in AP Calc, and we'd have 2-3 pass the AP Calc exam. And so it was a bit of a risky decision to say, like, sorry, but this isn't about because of you, right? You're awesome, you're amazing. But because if we can get this Calc 220 class and we can get 14 kids to pass Calc 220, that's part of the Michigan Transfer Agreement, we now have 14 kids that have Calc 220 credit. And so that, at the time, was a risky decision, being a new administrator to that building and kind of shaking that tree a little bit, you know, to do, in my opinion, what was best for students. That's what we ended up doing. The first year we ran it, we had 14 kids get Calc 220 credit. And so, you know, I feel like it was the right decision for the best interest of the students. Unfortunately, you know, the teacher, you know, disagreed, but we did make that decision. So I mean, that's the one that's just popping in my head just because you might be sticking your neck out a little too far on this one, but the core value of the students and the opportunities kind of prevailed.
Okay, we appreciate your interest in the position. Is there anything else that you would like us to know about how you would lead Almont Community Schools, or any questions you would like to ask the board?
I have the questions page, so that worked out. I think as far as in closing, no, I mean, I've talked about a few things. The career and college advisor and that position that we, you know, just a little data to back that up. We had a 13% increase in our FAFSA completion rates this year. So, you know, just that we're gonna make decisions what's best for students. We're gonna have collaborative processes. The voices, that's important to me to have them involved in all those processes. And just that we're here for kids, we're here for our students, and we want to continue to provide the opportunities. I've been very impressed already with what I've seen, the opportunities here for students, the achievement levels, and so I feel like this is just a great fit and great time to come in and join the team. So kudos to the board, and I also did say this in the beginning, but I know this is your third night in a row. So kudos to the board for, you know, the dedication to the position. And I did want to share, as I heard you talking about the PD advisory committee in the board meeting on Monday, I am in charge of that in Croslex. And so as far as that process to count those PD hours as instructional hours. So just, I think that is a great strategy to give the staff some time to develop the curriculum and the time they need. It's been hugely beneficial for our staff. And so just ending on that note, I guess, thank you for the time and, you know, for welcoming me here tonight. I do have 2 questions. One, hopefully we'll be meeting in, say, around about a year, you know, with me still, right, being here with you. What, in the board's opinion, what will make that a successful first year for the incoming superintendent?
I think tonight, you hit on a few of the points, and I speak for this board currently in place. Communication, transparency, bringing our community in. There is some healing that we need to do as a community from our failed bonds, and we're still working towards that, trying to make sure that the school is really the hub of the community and getting everybody to be one Almont. We bring
question I have is, what is one thing that we should never change about Almont Community Schools? What is that one thing?
Well, we had our student and staff engagement